welcome. First of all, welcome. This is Unsolicited Perspectives. I'm Bruce Anthony, your host here to lead the conversation in important events and topics that are shaping today's society. Join the conversation by following us wherever you get your audio podcast. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch our video podcast. Rate, review, like, comment, share. Share with your friends, share with your family, hell, even share with your enemies. On today's episode, I'll be interviewing Shanti Hershenson. She's a teenage author, and we're going to be talking about her life and her books. But that's enough of the intro. Let's get to the show. You know, when I talk about Gen Z, Shanti is one of the people that I'm talking about. I am so amazed by this younger generation to just, one, be entrepreneurs, two, not let society or constrictions hold them back. They are not going to be labeled. They're not going to be told what they can and cannot do. They are challenging the foundations of constraint in society. And what I mean by that is, my generation, millennials, Gen X, boomers, were told to do things a certain way in order to achieve success, in order to achieve happiness, because success equals happiness. Well, we've come to realize success doesn't necessarily equal happiness. And following a path that's let out for you doesn't automatically lead to success. So why did we follow these forms of assimilation that said you had to do things a certain way in order to find success and be happy? Well, this younger generation, Gen Z, is not doing that. They're saying, I can do this on my own. I can do what I want to do because these things interest me. And guess what? When you do things that you love, success, happiness, money, all that comes when your heart is pure with your passion. So I'm really excited to talk to this 16-year-old author. She's written 16 books. She's written 30 books. 16 have been published. She's got different genres that she's written from. You can check all of her information. It's in the bio, in the description of both the audio and the video podcast, as well as going to our website. We have a guest profile specifically for her, where you get links to all of her social media, her website, as well as where you can buy her books. So that's enough of this rambling. I'm more interested in learning more about Shanti. So let's get to the interview. Well, like I said, guys, I'm here with Shanti Hershenson, and she's an teenage author. And when I said teenage, not 18, 19, Shanti, how old are you?
I'm 16.
16. And you've written, I may have old information, but you have 9 published books, but 14 that you've written? No, there's more now.
It's 16 published books, and then I've written 30.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the reason why I said at the top, why I love Gen Z. They do things that we wouldn't even fathom to do as a millennial, Gen X, or a boomer. So Shanti, let's start from the beginning. What got you into writing?
So I've always really, really, really loved writing. I have memories of being in first grade, and I would scribble on pieces of paper, and I would tape them together and make these little books. Mm-hmm. So it's storytelling has just always been something that I was really interested in, but it wasn't something that I thought I could do as a kid and a teenager. I remember when I was younger, I probably wrote it down somewhere. I want to have a completely different job, but maybe if I am able, I could write one book and it would be cool. But what I didn't realize is I just wanted to write. I didn't want to do anything else. So as I got older, I still, I kept on writing. And eventually the pandemic came around, and that gave me the opportunity to write my first book because I was stuck at home. I was I need to do something. I can't just be playing video games and watching TV all day. That doesn't work. I'm miserable. So I just started writing, and the story I started writing, it was really bad. It's called Biome Lock.
Okay.
And it's this alien invasion series. It was originally supposed to be one book. However, that book got so long that it just had to be split into 3 different books. The first 2 have been published, and the third one is still in editing. And it does have a place in my heart.
Hmm.
It's a really nice book. I don't like any of my old books though, so nothing personal against Biome Luck.
Well, so that's interesting. To just try and tie in a little bit so that there's a connection from your books and what I'm doing right now, interviewing. I can tell you this will be the 100th or 7th or 8th episode. I don't know which one, but I can tell you the first few interviews I did sucked. Right. And because you're just starting out, it's just starting new. So don't, I'm not going to tell you what to think or how to feel. Right. If you feel like they suck, okay. But it's a hell of an accomplishment in and of itself because you
Yeah.
first wrote this book when you were 14.
That one I was 12.
Jesus, like
I was,
12.
I was in middle school. I was so little.
Let me tell you something. I was 10 or 11 years old, and I was first introduced to the movie The Godfather. It's still one of my top 5 favorite movies. And I found out, oh, it's a book. And I got the book, and at 10 years old, that book was a little too big, too dense, too explicit for me to read. But I said, I want to write a book. I'm going to do this. So I got on this little laptop. They were much different back then. They were these big, bulky things. And I started writing, and I had nowhere to go. Like I had a story in my head and didn't know how to formulate it. So I know this question was going to come later, but I'm going to go ahead and jump into it now. What is your writing process? How is it different from when you were 12 to now 16? And how did you go about starting to write a book?
So when I began, I like most people had no idea what I was doing. Like I looked up how to write a book, but honestly, any article online like that's like how to write a book, some of them are helpful, some of them aren't, but the bottom line is it's a very personal process.
Okay.
And I think I made one of my first TikToks I ever posted was about it, like that, where it's like I can kind of guide you through the process and give you some tips on what to do, but it's ultimately like up to you. So when I started writing, I was like, it's gonna be like a short story. Obviously, I had a little too many ideas for it to be a short story, but at first, like when I just started, I had no idea where it was going. I was like, aliens, they're making humans live in biomes, yay!
Okay.
And I was like, well, if it's good enough and maybe long enough, I'll publish it. And another like fact about me at the time is I had no idea how long a book was supposed to be. You always think in pages rather than words, but then what I found is writers think in words, not pages.
Wow, okay.
So I had to figure out, like, well, what is the word count of, my favorite book? And at the time, my favorite book, it's called The Boy Who Dared. It's a really good book. And I think I read it when I was in about 5th grade. So that was my favorite book at the time. And it's a short book. It's around 30,000 words. So I was like, okay, my book is going to be 30,000 words. And I just kept writing with that goal in mind. And what I soon realized was if I wrote, like, every single day, that was much more like better. And if I wrote the same amount every day. So then I started doing that. And I passed the 30,000 word mark. And I still was not close to being done.
Right.
And I was like, okay, well, there's this book I really like, and it's like 50,000 words. And then, of course, I passed the 50,000 word mark. And it just kept going until I was about 250,000 words in. I think that was around my finishing point. It's kind of complicated because technically, like, I finished the book at 90,000 words, but then editing, I added so much more stuff because I had to, like, almost rewrote the book that it was. So when I was 13, I had a 250,000 word book under my belt, and that was longer than any other book I had ever read in my entire life.
Wow.
I do not read, like, I don't read long books usually.
So I'm trying to, and as you said, originally people think as in pages, not as in words. So how many pages is that many words?
So it depends on, it all depends on like the typesetting and everything, but I have a printed version of it up there, and that is around 800 pages, 900 pages.
Ooh.
It was a lot. And I was a kid that I liked to read. I enjoyed reading. I did not like reading like really long books. When I was in 7th grade, I tried to read War and Peace, and I did not get more than 100 pages in.
Okay.
Like, I feel like most kids really struggle with really big, intimidating books. But then I'd written one.
Right.
It's intimidating to edit.
Yeah, that would be intimidating to edit. So, okay, I'm trying to think of the process. So years ago, years ago, I was a creative director for a professional wrestling company. So it's storytelling, and you would write a program or a script or story of where you wanted to go. And we always started, or me personally, when I wrote the script out, I started at the end where I wanted it to go and then went backwards to the beginning. How was it when you first started writing your very first book? Did you start at the end, or did you start at the beginning and then as you're writing, you're coming up with more and more stuff?
I definitely started at the beginning.
Hmm.
It was a really write and see where it goes book. For the first, I don't know, maybe 10, 20,000 words of the book, I was just writing whatever came to mind. And then eventually what happened was I started having ideas that I needed to write down for later. And a lot of
Hmm.
my ideas were really absurd and ridiculous. Like I was just writing down anything I could think of
Hmm.
because this is my first book. I want it to be great. But honestly my ideas were terrible. And honestly, though, my process now is very similar to that. But I will say I do have more of an overall idea in mind now. Like
Hmm.
with the books, with the books I'm writing now, I'm like, well, I know how it's going to begin, obviously, and I know approximately what I want to get done by the end of the story.
Hmm.
And I'm not a big outliner, although I'm not necessarily the kind of writer who just has keeps going and is surprised. It also depends on the book because I've had some books where I've literally written nothing down and just have
Okay.
just written it. But usually what happens is I just as I'm writing, I get some ideas, and by the halfway point, I have a pretty good idea of like what's gonna happen from then on.
Okay.
And that's what I'm doing, like, with the book I'm writing right now, although I have a really bad habit of I'm literally writing my notes inside the document rather than on a separate, thing, but
Right.
whatever works.
Yeah, it's your process, right? As you said, everybody, it's their personal journey.
Yeah.
Writing is your personal journey. So however you get through it, you get through it. And 30 books is pretty remarkable. Now, I have to ask, because you've written so many, it's 30 books in basically 4 years, right? Because you
Yeah.
started at the beginning of the pandemic. Here we are in 2024. So it's 30 books in 4 years. And you're in high school now. So you started when you were in middle school, you're in high school. How does writing affect your not only your academic life, but also your personal life?
So, I'd say that in some ways it affects my academic life because I tend to prioritize my writing over my schoolwork.
Mhm,
With that being said, I still, like, get good grades and I still, I still complete all my homework, but sometimes I write first and I have to do my homework, like, last minute.
mhm.
Socially, however, I have noticed it doesn't have as much of an effect
Okay.
as it may seem. I try to also just get my writing done before I see people,
Mhm.
but sometimes if I'm seeing people like earlier in the day, then I'll just get my writing done later. But I still I'm still able to like have a pretty normal social life, but still I do prioritize my writing over that, meaning like if I have something important that day that's like writing related or if I have an event, I am going to do that over, anything else.
What's that like for you socially? Here you are, 16-year-old author. You're doing interviews, you got websites, you're doing appearances. Uh, you're basically a child celebrity. So what is
Thank
that
you.
like socially for you?
It can be a little scary. I have to
Mhm.
say, I know there's a lot of people who are like, in English classes, I find that it's like, this was more so when I was in middle school than now in like ninth grade.
Mhm.
But I like people, we had to do this thing where people could sign up to critique your work and no one would sign up to critique mine. I got no feedback.
They were intimidated.
Yeah, so people can be kind of intimidated and it's a little upsetting because it's like, I'm kind of normal. Like I do
Right.
have normal interests too. But also in many ways it's really cool. Like
Mhm.
and honestly, like I wouldn't really trade it for anything. Like it's a lot of fun like being able to like go around and meet people and do interviews and like sign books and stuff. And I think there's a lot of, people I know who are like my age who don't entirely understand it because,
Right.
there's probably a lot more fun things that a teenager could be doing. But like to me, like this is really fun.
Right, because this is your passion. This is where
Yeah.
this is your love. How is okay, so you start at 12. What was the encouragement or discouragement like from your parents?
So my parents were like really, really supportive early on. The
Hmm.
funny thing is, I didn't tell them I was writing a book at first.
You
I have
just
this
did it.
thing where for some reason I'm always like slightly embarrassed about the book I'm writing when I'm starting out. I cannot explain why. Like there's always something I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to like talk about it yet. But it just like
Hmm.
comes from like this weird like sense of like embarrassment. So I did not talk about the book at first.
Hmm.
Like I don't even think I told them I was writing a book. And then one day, like sort of mid-pandemic, we had like family over and we were doing like the socially distanced backyard like
Hmm.
thing, and I came out and I was like, do any of you guys want to read the prologue for the book I'm writing? And
Wow.
everyone was like, what? And then I read it and everyone was really supportive, even though it was probably a really bad prologue. I don't entirely remember I kind of remember the Biomlock prologue, but I could not tell you how bad it is.
Hmm.
Like, I'm not sure. But I think it was pretty, like, all over the place, especially, like, the early version of the prologue.
Right.
Like, pre-editing was pretty rough.
Uh-huh.
But they were all still, like, immensely supportive about it. And I was, really grateful because, I know people whose parents aren't and whose
Right.
family isn't. And that it really does, like, make a difference.
I'm not a parent, but I am somebody's child. And, my parents, my dad is, he does music and the musician, and my mom has always done crafts. They have their regular jobs, but they've always kind of encouraged. I have a sister and a brother. They've always encouraged us to do the things that we're interested in. And arts has always been part of that interest. And I think it's very important for parents to encourage those interests in arts in their kids, because it expands them and their personality and their view of the world. So that's absolutely beautiful that you had
Yeah.
so much support. And was it a little nerve-wracking because it's not your immediate family, it was an extended family,
Yeah,
correct?
it was really scary. And, like, I didn't know, like, how they were gonna react because, I don't think I'd shared the prologue with really anyone. I do
Mm-hmm.
kind of remember that I think I sent it to, like, my 7th grade teacher.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, like, like, no one had read it. And, of course, like, your teacher's gonna be nice to you.
Right.
Then again, your family's gonna be nice to you too. But,
Well, sometimes,
yeah.
my family is, we cut to the truth and just, if it's bad, it's bad. If it's good, it's good.
Yeah.
So you write about diverse genres, and we'll get into um, some of your more recent books, and You Won't Know Her Name, and I Know Her Name. But not only are you doing poetry, you're doing dystopia, you're doing sci-fi. Do these ideas just come to you and it's like, I want to write about that? Or is it strategic? Do you write a book and say, okay, I want to try to write something different, so I'm going to go over here that's completely opposite of what I was doing before?
It's a mix of both. I have to say, a lot of the time I just have an idea. I remember when I first started writing Biomlock, which is also like my first dystopian book, I didn't even know what the genre was. I was just like, aliens, I guess this is sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
But now I do have a pretty clear idea of what the genre is as I'm writing. And typically it's just like an idea pops in my head or I see something somewhere and I'm like, this would make a pretty cool book. But other times, especially when I have the books that are like really, really, really long. For
Mm-hmm.
example, the book I'm writing right now, about 120,000 words in, and it's a YA book, so it's a little complicated because
Mm-hmm.
it's not supposed to be that long.
Right.
But I'm like, I don't want to write another high school book. I got to write something different.
Mm. You want to challenge your writing ability.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can dig that. So let's get into some stuff that you talk about, and You Won't Know Her Name. And that book tackles the issues of bullying. Can you share the inspiration of writing that book?
Yeah, so You Won't Know Her Name is very, very much based on a true story.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically like exactly like what happened to me, and it was a hard book to write. So I started writing it, and I think it was actually a pretty quick process because it's poetry. So I
Mm-hmm.
wrote it when I was 13 years old, and it was the summer between 7th and 8th grade. And
Mm-hmm.
I I just didn't really think anything was gonna come of it at first. So I got bullied really, really badly when I was in 6th grade,
Mm.
and It was horrific. It was terrible. Like, the book really goes into it a lot. And the
Mhm.
response I received from my school was very much like, oh, it's just middle school. It happens all the time.
Hmm.
And evidently, it's not just middle school. But
No.
I felt silenced. I felt like there was nothing I could do. I tried, like, speaking at, like, board meetings about it. I tried meeting with, like, just anyone I could, trying to make a difference in my school, and really nothing was happening. So I was
Mhm.
like, well, I could write a book about it. Mainly, also, it was just because I wanted to get the story off my chest. I was really
Right.
tired of being told to, like, be quiet.
Mhm.
So I started writing it, and then I published it. Honestly, it was kind of random compared to my other releases. I was just like, okay, I'm writing this book. It's going to come out in a few days. Buy it if you want.
Right.
And my marketing at the beginning was really weak, but what I found was the book, like, instantly did really well. And it started doing better than, like, all of my other books.
Hmm.
So
Did you, with the audience that read the book, and I'm going to assume okay, first let me ask you, what was the core audience that bought and read this book?
it's always hard to tell, but it's definitely a mix of, like, teenagers that are currently, going through hard times at school, and just, teenagers in general. So there's a lot of adults who've read the book and reviewed it and have said that it brought them back to their own middle school days.
Mhm. Yeah, so that's the reason why I love Gen Z. You guys will make sure that your voices are heard. I have not been a teenager in a very long time, but I absolutely remember what it was like. And I had a different experience. I was more of a taller guy, bigger kid. So I wouldn't get bullied that much because there was a physicality that I would bring to it, but there was still bullying. There was people picking on, and it didn't change. Like middle school, high school, guess what? There's always these kind of people as you grow up that are bullies.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in, and I want to get back to that, but I'm interested in the dystopia start of your writing. Was that because you had an interest in just aliens and invasion? Because dystopia is really, I mean, we're talking like Mad Max. It's the end of the world, bad type of situations. Was this how you were viewing the world that you were living in at the time? Or was it just something that it was just cool to see and examine?
I'd say yes and no. I think there was a part of me that really wrote it from this place of, like, frustration
Hmm.
with, like, things that were going on in the world, but there was also, a part of me that was like, "This is cool, like, I
Right.
like this."
Hmm.
Um, and it was really, like, a lot of it was just, like, I was interested in aliens and stuff, but there's also, I noticed in Biomlock, and this isn't even something I became aware of until years after, there's a lot of themes of isolation in the book,
Mm-hmm.
and, of course, we were going through a global pandemic, so I was
Right.
really isolated, and I was, stuck at home for most of the time. And it felt really, really challenging to just, like, go outside. And
Hmm.
that kind of is reflected in Biomlock. And I just think, it's really interesting because that wasn't something I was at all aware of
Hmm.
at the time. It was just something that I was writing. And then I realized it really kind of, a lot of the things the characters are going through reflected how I felt at the time.
Oh wow. The isolation, because I've always been fascinated at how it affected your generation. Because me, I'm a grown adult. I loved being
Yeah.
isolated because I don't like socializing and going out that much. Just when you get older, these things happen. But for your generation, for your age, that's what you want to do. You want to be around your friends. You want to go out. You want to do things. How isolated, not only from the pandemic, but just in life in general, when comparing to the book You Won't Know Her Name, did you feel? In other words, so you were being bullied in the sixth grade, pandemic comes. So did you feel isolated from the bullying? And then it's just added on to the fact that the pandemic comes and there's an extra layer of isolation there?
I think, honestly, kind of the opposite. Like,
Hmm.
I was feeling really isolated during the
Hmm.
pandemic. I also kind of felt kind of free
Wow. Okay.
because, you can't really easily get bullied in the middle of a
But this is true.
pandemic. There's cyberbullying, but that didn't happen until seventh grade. So, um, you know, it was a point where I was like, well, I don't have much to worry about. And honestly, at first, like the first maybe month or so of the pandemic was great. Like, I am not a particularly social person. I'm a bit
Hmm.
of an introvert. I didn't really mind like watching TV all day and not having to go to school in person. But
Hmm.
then, of course, got bored.
Right.
And really, it was the boredom that caused that isolation because, there were things I started to miss. Like, I
Hmm.
really missed the trampoline park
Hmm.
and I missed, like going out to eat and I missed like going traveling. So that's where the isolation came from is like the little things like I missed rather than like I didn't really miss talking to people.
Hmm.
But, I still got through it and how I got through it was writing.
Yes, and that's a fantastic outlet. So before we end this segment, we talked about You Won't Know Her Name, but then you follow that book up with I Know Her Name. Can you tell my audience what that book is about and how they complement one another?
Yeah, so I Know Her Name is a very, very real collection of poetry. And I say it's very real because it's just genuinely poems I wrote like before, during, and after the publication of You Won't Know Her Name. Like a lot of the poems are poems I wrote while I was being bullied. And then there are some I wrote after and
Mm-hmm.
reflecting on everything and feeling almost like sympathy for the bully, but at the same time, like wishing I'd never met her.
Mm.
And like all of these, it's a lot of really complicated emotions. It's a very edgy poetry book to the point where it's like, I'm like, oh, I don't like this. Because it's
Mm.
like middle school poetry, but it's also, I kind of like that it's middle school poetry because it's real.
Right.
It's things I wrote when I was 13. The poems don't have to be amazing for the message to get across.
Right. They're raw and authentic. And that's the
Yeah.
most important thing. Hey there, podcast listeners. It's Bruce Anthony here, and welcome to another episode of Unsolicited Perspectives. Today, I want to talk to you about something that's been on my mind lately, the importance of staying hydrated and taking care of ourselves. Whether it's prioritizing our health and wellness, or gearing up for festival seasons, or just gearing up for whatever season or time of year, there's one brand that's been my go-to for all things hydration, Liquid IV. Speaking of health and wellness, let's dive into how Liquid IV can fuel your well-being. Imagine starting your day off right, feeling refreshed and energized. Liquid IV Hydration Multiplier is the missing piece in your daily routine. With just one stick, you get 5 essential vitamins and 2 times faster hydration than water alone. It's perfect for those early mornings, pre-workout boosts, moments when you're just feeling run down, or even after a late night or long flights. I absolutely love how convenient Liquid IV is. The packaging makes it easy to bring with me wherever I go. And let me tell you, it's become a vital daily part of my routine. The flavors, let me tell you something, they're incredible. From refreshing sea berry and strawberry lemonade to classics like lemon lime and watermelon, there's a flavor for every preference. It's like a burst of hydration with a hint of deliciousness. Picture this. 1 stick of Liquid IV mixed in 16 ounces of water, hydrating you 2 times faster and more efficient than water alone. And with 12 mouth-watering flavors, you'll never get bored with your hydration routine. Plus, Liquid IV is packed with 5 essential vitamins: B3, B5, B6, B12, and of course, vitamin C. It's also made with premium ingredients, non-GMO, free of gluten, dairy, and soy. This is hydration at its finest. But it doesn't stop there. Liquid IV believes that access to clean and abundant water is the foundation of a healthier world. That's why they partner with leading organizations, finding innovative solutions to help communities protect both their water and their futures. It's incredible to know that Liquid IV has already donated over 39 million servings in 50 plus countries around the world. They truly walk the talk. Get 20% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use code UNSOLICITED at checkout. That's 20% off anything you order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code UNSOLICITED at liquidiv.com. Remember, folks, taking care of ourselves should always be a priority. So why wait? Head over to liquidiv.com, pick your favorite flavors, and experience hydration like never before. Stay refreshed, stay hydrated, and keep rocking those unsolicited perspectives. So Shanti, writing about the themes of bullying. I want to get into how the bullying affected you. I know you used writing as an outlet in order to deal with the bullying, but I want to know like how the bullying personally affected you. And then how has writing these books and the audience response to these books affected you? Because I'm sure there's some people that have come to you and said, your book inspired me to tell my story. Your book inspired me to realize I'm not alone, which is so very, very important for people to realize that they're not alone. So can you get into a little bit about, one, how the bullying affecting you personally, and then the response to your books afterwards?
Yeah, being so young, the bullying affected me in like some like kind of strange ways. Like for one, a very typical way, I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified to come to school.
Mm-hmm.
I'd never had a panic attack really before then.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, panicking. I was just like, how did this happen to me? Because, I don't want to get into like exactly what happened too much because I don't want to
Right,
spoil the
right,
book.
right.
But, this person was my friend. And
Mm-hmm.
then them being my friend turned into this really weird, like disturbing relationship.
Right.
And I was in many ways confused. I didn't know how I was supposed to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to be the kid that was like, oh, I'm so scared, but I kind of, was in many ways. There was also a
Mm-hmm.
part of me that was like, oh, like I'm trying to find a way to word this. That's not, you know, I was like,
Say what you feel.
I want revenge. Not that I ever even got revenge, but
Mm-hmm.
one thing I did was there was this particular TV show I really liked that they constantly like made comments about. And
Mm-hmm.
like that, a lot of the bullying had to do with the things I was interested in. Of course, it was much more deeper than that now that I'm older, but that's
Right.
kind of like when I was younger, like I didn't even fully understand what was going on. I was like,
Exactly. Yeah.
"Oh, they bullied me because I didn't like this TV show." It was a lot more than that.
Mm-hmm.
So I wore a different shirt of that show every single day at one point. I also, I really made it known, like, I don't feel comfortable around this person. And I wasn't shy about talking about it, which, in some ways I feel a little bad about. But also, it's kind of I warned people. And what I realized was there were a lot of people that had the same experience, like, at my school, like, with that person. And it turned into this really long kind of conflict with my school administration where it's like, there is
Mm-hmm.
evidence that this person really needs to get help, but you're
Mm-hmm.
not doing anything about it, you know?
Wow. So you're dealing with all of that and you're writing books and
Yeah.
you publish these two very, very important books that deal with bullying. What was the response like when people read those books?
The response, it was amazing. Like, I always think You Won't Know Her Name is not that good of a book overall just because the writing style kind of annoys me now because it's like it's poetry, but the poetry is not even that good. And I, should have done it differently. But either way, the response was amazing. Like, I've
Mm-hmm.
had so many reviews and I've received messages from people who are like, this book really helped me. Like, this book made me feel like I'm not alone.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really good because then those messages made me feel like I wasn't alone.
Right.
And it's really like, I help my readers and my readers help me.
Mm-hmm.
And, just like reading the reviews of people who are like, like especially the adults who are like, this book brought me back to my own middle school days. It's a really surreal feeling
Mm.
because, it means your writing really touched people. And of course,
Right.
I'm sure like my other books have touched people too, but those are like, action-packed sci-fi books. So they don't necessarily touch people in the way that these like personal books do. For example, one of my more recent books had the same effect. And it's, the first time I've had that response since You Won't Know Her Name. And
Mm-hmm.
those are some of the kinds of books I enjoy writing the most, are the ones that I know are really going to impact people and are really going to make a difference, more so than just giving people like a good time.
You know what? I think that filling somebody's mind, taking somebody's mind away and filling somebody's heart is fantastic. And that's the reason why I was really fascinated with not only your age and being an author, but how you tackle different genres. You are helping people with every book that you write. But I'm interested, you said the more recent book that you did. Could you tell my audience about the more recent book that you did that also has given you the same kind of uh, appreciation or the same kind of effect on you personally as You won't know her name, and I know her name.
Yeah, so I have a book called Helipads in Heaven. I actually have it, like,
Okay, there
always
you
have it
go.
sitting on my desk. And this is an author copy though, so it has the ugly banner. But it was it was a pretty interesting book because it wasn't actually supposed to be as deeply personal as it was. And the idea started out from a daydream I had.
Hmm.
And where I was like, oh, it would be really interesting if I got to like talk to my younger self who is like really into writing. So that was the
Hmm.
basis for it. And then I wrote down like, oh, well, imagine an author time traveling to like talk to their younger self.
Wow.
And, there's a lot of plot holes in that. But what happened was I started writing the screenplay.
Hmm.
And I just, it was for my freshman creative writing class. And I loved writing it. It was a 45-page screenplay. It was like the longest like work in the class, which was embarrassing. And it went from being an author just time traveling to talk to her younger self to an author who's like enlisted as the first time traveler and has to observe her younger self, but she can't interact. So it then becomes this sort of, there's now a conflict.
Uh-huh.
But as I was writing it, it was basically me in like not 20 or so years, and I'm like really, really, really famous,
Hmm.
and I'm gonna go travel back in time. So it really is all the characters are based on me, more so the younger self than the older self, obviously. And I also happened to get bullied when I was in fourth grade, and it wasn't nearly as bad as what I experienced when I was in middle school, but it was still, it was something. It still hurt.
Hmm.
So the author, unknowingly gets sent right back in time to that period,
Wow.
and she has to try not to like interact. And at the same time, we have the younger self's point of view, and we watch as she, explores her love of writing, but also has it be taken away by like unsupportive teachers and mean classmates. So it's like we have these two things at once. And, the bullying is really, really, really realistic and just basically just exactly like what happened to me. Um, and then at the same time, we have this cool like time travel adventure where this author is going back and like visiting all these nostalgic things and like taking notes and really trying to like, get an understanding of like how she got to the point she was. And then of course it all starts to come together when she realizes like, she can't just like sit aside and, watch like,
Right. Wow.
her younger self be like tormented.
That's a dope story.
Thank you.
Okay. So that leads me to a different question because you're still a student and you're still taking English courses. What is it like? What is the dynamic like with teachers when they find out when you enter in their classroom, this is a published author?
It definitely, again, like, depends. I
Hmm.
have like, all my teachers right now are all, like, extremely supportive, but in the past, I've had teachers that are, like, not supportive,
Hmm.
and that's a very, challenging, like, thing to have.
I, I would think that as the older you get, you'll receive less and less challenge.
That's
Uh,
definitely how it's been, yeah.
Yeah, because they'll see you more, not quite as a peer, but more of an adult. Whereas when you were younger, they were probably like, this little kid thinks that they're smarter than I am. And that's
Yeah,
not what you're doing. And in a way, is your writing therapy? Because a
yeah,
lot of it is very personal.
definitely, yeah.
So when you write, is there a release of relief?
Yeah, it really, especially in the books that are like, personal to me, that have a lot of things based on true stories, it really does feel like I'm getting things off my chest. Like
Hmm.
occasionally, there are things I'm writing that's like I've never told anybody, and then being
Right.
able to like get it off my chest and able to like really share it with my readers and have people that relate to these experiences is really, really, really great. Like I'm feeling it with a book I'm writing right now, where it's not really based on a true story, but there's like little things and characters that are based on real people, and then being
Hmm.
able to write them is just really relieving, and it kind of frees me of that like, internal like anxiety almost that I have.
Right. Do you think it's easier? Obviously, I'm asking probably a dumb question here, but for you, it's probably easier to write it in the form of a character as opposed for you to come out and just say, "This is what's going on for me." But you're writing, the character is you or pieces of you, and you're saying your truth through the character, and that and so you don't have to say it yourself.
Yeah, I
Your work says
definitely,
it.
yeah. It's like it is easier a lot of the time. especially with like people I don't know. Like I'm always like, I don't want to tell like people I don't know too well, like a lot of stuff. But then
Hmm.
I'm kind of telling, complete strangers things like, through my writing. But also like when it comes to my close family, like I'm very open. So
Right.
I just straight up just say things.
Okay. Um, okay. So can you tell me what it's like trying to get your work published?
Yeah, so I self-publish with Kindle Direct Publishing, and in some ways that it makes the process easier. In
Hmm.
many ways, it makes it really, really difficult because I have to do everything on my own. I, of
Hmm.
course, I have an editor and I hire cover designers, but all of that outreach is completely me.
Hmm.
I have to like reach out to designers. I have to, figure out the whole. Thankfully, I've published enough books now that KDP is like pretty easy for me. But occasionally there's like little hiccups that make it really, really annoying.
So anybody can self-publish a book that they want to. What are the processes for some? Because there are going to be some people out here that are going to listen and watch this and say, I've had this idea for a book a really long time, but I don't know how to even begin getting it published. Or maybe they have a finished book and they're shopping into publishers, not knowing that there's an option to self-publish. So what is the process of doing that?
Yeah, so really all you do is you go on Amazon's KDP, or I also use Ingram Spark for my expanded distribution. And
Hmm.
what you do from there is you have to like, fill out this form that's like, book's title, all the information, and then you upload the files, and then like you set the pricing, and you do the categories and the description, and then you like set the price. I think I said set the pricing already. But
Yeah.
anyways, and then you hit publish.
And it publishes.
Not instantly, it has to go through review, but I've never had a book really get rebounded unless there's like maybe the cover is not the right size or something like that. But
Okay.
so everyone can publish a book, but not everyone can like publish a successful book. And really
Yeah,
the
yeah.
difference is like, you have to do all the marketing on your own. So you have to be able to like reach out to book reviewers and interviewers, and you have to be able to do advertising. And that's the tricky part of self-publishing.
And so that's okay. So for you, because you've gotten the groove of things, right? Like you've done, I forgot what the number was. You said it was 16 published books,
Yeah.
but written 30. So it was 16 published books. So now you've already, the system of how to go from A to Z, to formulating the idea, to getting it published with all of the marketing and the cover art and all that other stuff. But how hard is that process that very first time that you did that?
Oh my gosh. It was so with the first book I published, it's very complicated because By Unlock, which is the first book I wrote, wasn't the first book I published. I
Hmm.
had this novella called the Chronicles of it's actually the Nightmare of Zal Delane. It's a series of novellas called the Chronicles of Zal Delane. And that was my first, book. I was doing it all on my own. And honestly, in some ways it's really hard. In many ways it's not, because when you have no idea what you're doing, it's in some ways easier because
Right.
just do random stuff. So I didn't have a marketing plan at all. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, throw it on Amazon, promote it. And then slowly I started being really able to like promote the book, and I started learning about like newsletter promotions and advertising. But it was a
Hmm.
slow process. And now I'd say with like my current books, it's in some ways much easier and it's in some ways much harder,
Mm.
because now I really know how elaborate it is, and I have to come up with these really detailed marketing plans and like do all the
Hmm.
budgeting and figure out, you know, like what needs to happen before certain dates. And
Right.
it's a lot more, but in a completely different way, it's a lot easier now that I have it all written out. I don't need to completely scramble to like get everything to work.
I'm always thinking I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and I'm always thinking of ways to create business. What you're describing is you can sell yourself as a publisher. In other words, somebody could come to you, say, I have this book. I don't know how to promote it, to market it, to sell it, the price point. And you could charge people. A consultant, right? An agency, like
Yeah.
and you're building this knowledge at such a young age. The world is your oyster. You can literally do whatever you want in the literary world, because you started so young and you're doing it all yourself. I just think this is just really, really remarkable. You should
Thank you.
really really be proud of yourself, because to be 16 years old and to be doing all of this is just absolutely commendable. I kind of want to go back to bullying, and you made it personal, and you talk about it a lot, and it's affecting people. Is this something that you feel like you're going to continue to go down this path as far as writing about bullying and personal stuff because it touches people?
I think definitely. I'm not sure entirely about bullying. The book I'm writing right now is also sort of about bullying and about how schools handle it. But
Mhm.
definitely, I do love writing, personal books. And on the other hand, I do love writing the really fun, like
Mhm.
action, like, kind of violent books. So we will see, because, what I find is like I write, one of those, and then I write like a personal book, and I kind of almost alternate. So I think I'm
Mhm.
definitely going to continue doing both, but I do really enjoy writing these personal books. I'm planning like a memoir about something completely different. So I'm thinking that's something that I might do, because always, connecting with people on, a more like relatable level is always fun than
Mhm.
just connecting with people through like action packed books with aliens and robots. But even still, I do enjoy writing those books too, and I don't think I'm ever going to stop writing those.
So you said earlier you wrote the screenplay, and I think that's a fantastic movie. I want that to get done. What is the long goal here? Is it to continue to be an author? Is it to write screenplays and develop movies? Is this something that you're thinking about in college? What are your plans for the next few years as you get out of high school and move on into, I guess they call it adulthood, but you seem pretty adult already, but technically 18 is adulthood. So what is the plan for the next few years of what you want to do as far as your writing and your career?
I definitely want to do a little bit of everything when it comes to writing. I did really enjoy writing the screenplay. So that book, Helipads in Heaven, like I wrote it as a screenplay,
Mhm.
and that was a lot of fun. But then honestly, I had more fun turning it into a novel. But now I have both. But there's like
Mhm.
the novel is so much better. But I do still think, like, even though like I write better novels than I do screenplays, like screenwriting is definitely something that I'd be interested in. I think, it can be helpful to like write a screenplay version of a book and, the novel version,
Mhm.
and potentially like if I can become a screenwriter when I'm older and actually see my work at the big screen, like that would be amazing.
So, what is the difference between? There's obviously a difference, but what is the difference in writing between writing a novel and writing a screenplay? Because they are different. I was watching a TV show, and it was based on The Godfather. And Mario Puzo wrote The Godfather, the novel, but he had to adapt it to a screenplay, and it's a different form of writing. So, can you explain to the audience how that different form of writing affects a novel and a screenplay?
Yeah, so a screenplay is very just straightforward. It's, you have to show everything. You
Hmm.
can't just, or I guess you kind of have to, I guess you more have to show it than you have to tell. Which that's the same with writing novels, but it's all visual. You have to
Hmm.
show the character's emotion through their facial expressions. You can't just write, this character is sad and they're thinking this. So it's all very visual, and it's a lot quicker.
Mm.
Screenplays are like mostly dialogue, and then a
Right.
little bit of, description when you're describing like but even actually not really. Like
Okay.
I found that, most of the description, that's the job of the set designer. So
Mm.
it's like all dialogue, where a novel is a lot more internal a lot of the time, where you can really go into the characters' like thoughts as opposed to having to show them. And that was a real challenge when I was writing the screenplay for Helipads in Heaven, because what I
Mhm.
had the character do is I had the character do a voiceover and like talk
Mm.
about things, because otherwise I had no way to show what was like what was, how
Right.
she connected to any of the places. But it worked. And then when I was turning that into a novel, which is, now the published version, like I just, had it as like regular description.
So, what can my audience expect from you as far as the next grouping of books that come out? You said you're working on one right now. What is the latest book that's released right now? And what are you working on now? You don't have to give us all the plot points. We're not going to do that, but just an idea of what's coming down the pipeline.
So my most recent book is technically it's a crossover between Biome and the Chronicles of the Zyle Lane, but that's not one of my major releases. So still technically like my most recent like big book is Helipads in Heaven. But upcoming, I'd say you can expect a lot of books that are similar to my old stuff. I have a book coming out on April 29th, and it's going to be number 17. It's called Little Green Man. I actually wrote it during the summer of 8th and ninth grade. So I wrote it when I was 14, but I just,
Okay.
just got around to it. And that's
Hmm.
obviously it has aliens, but it's more of a mystery, and it has a lot more like high school, and it's more realistic than like my crazy action-packed books. Like it's a lot more grounded. But there's
Okay.
aliens.
There's
And
aliens,
then
right?
after that, I'm going to release hopefully the final 2 books in the Never Dying series. So 2024 is going to be a year for a lot of older books
Hey,
and a
look.
lot of like older series, but it's also like, a lot of action, a lot of fun. And in there somewhere, I'm hopefully going to release some more like personal, realistic like memoirs and things as well. And
Okay,
maybe
cool.
poetry.
Uh, eh, Hey, look, especially when the poetry that you're writing is so deep, so personal, and touching so many people, I would definitely encourage you to keep doing that. Um,
Thank you.
is there anything that you want to leave my audience with that you've learned throughout the process of becoming this young author?
Yeah, so a really big tip of mine, it's kind of cliche, it's kind of corny, but don't let your age get in the way. And
Mm,
this not only applies to teenagers, but it applies to adults. Because,
mm.
there are a lot of adults who are like, oh, I'm too old to write a book. I should have written it when I was younger. You know, you're never too old or too young to write a book. And, on the other hand, there are teenagers that are like, oh, I'm too young. I'm just going to do this when I'm older. But if I can do it, you can too.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. And as I said to everybody, we're going to put the website in the descriptions. Go check out her books. Her books are for everybody. They're not just for teenagers. They're for everybody. And this is a star, but this is going to be a superstar. You guys are going to want to get on the bandwagon. I mean, we're jumping in the middle. We didn't jump on it early. We jumping in the middle, but we got to get on this bandwagon. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Wow. Shanti is such an extraordinary young individual. That was really a dope interview. And I love a lot of the things that she said. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. But I want to point everybody to her website. It's Shanti Hershenson. It's ShantiHershenson.com, that you can get all the information on her books, her social media. Also, like I said, that information will be provided in the descriptions of both the audio and video podcast. And if you go to our website, there's a special guest profile for her. But this 16-year-old just dropped some wisdom in some of the last things that she said. When she says, your age doesn't determine whether you can or cannot do something. And that registered with me. I'm 43 years old. I started this podcast at 42. I wish I had started it at 25 when I originally came up with the idea of internet radio show, right? But like, it's not too late for me to try something new. Conversely, in addition to that, she's started writing when she was 12 years old. And you know how she did it? She didn't hesitate. She didn't think too much about it. She just did it. And oftentimes, I think people are stuck in their head and it holds them back from accomplishing things that they could accomplish, dreams that they could reach, because they could come up with all types of reasons of why not to do it. Or this isn't the right time, or I don't have the money, or I don't have time to do it right now, or I'm too busy with other things that are going on, or I don't know how to get started, or when I finish it, I don't know what to do. That seems like a lot of work. I don't know if I'm up to the task. The only way you find out is by just doing it. And Shanti proved that you can just decide to do something, follow your passion. And look, like I said, she's 16 years old, 16 published books, 30 written, and she's got more on the. This young lady just broke down her 2024, and it's something like 4 books that she's got planned to come out. And did you peep her game? She does all the marketing, all the promoting, and she figured out how to do it on her own. The design, all that stuff. She figured out how to do it on her own. And she started doing this at 12 years old. Don't tell me that you're too old to do something. And don't tell me this younger generation is too young to accomplish something. So often I speak to older people and they push away the younger generation when the younger generation speaks up. And you hear it just in the interview when I asked her how her English teachers take her, right? When she was younger, they brushed her aside and didn't really want to pay attention to her. But now that she's getting older, they look at her a little bit differently and they say, oh, we want to give you a little bit more, I don't know, cred for what it is that you're doing. When fact of the matter is, she's doing something that they either couldn't fathom doing or couldn't do on their own. Most older people look at this younger generation and they say, well, I couldn't do that when I was younger. So what makes me think that they can do it? They're more advanced. They have more access to information than we ever did. I'm an 80s and 90s baby. The only way for me to get my information before Windows 95 came out, and Windows 95 came out when I was in high school, the only way to get information was actually going to the public library or finding encyclopedias. And guess what? Sometimes those encyclopedias were made in the 60s and 70s, and they weren't giving you accurate information for the 80s or 90s. Now, information's literally at the palm of our hands. I told the story of when I was at my sister's house for Christmas, and all we did was debate, argue, have conversations, and use Google all day to figure out the answers to our questions. This younger generation has grown up with that. They are smarter. They are more advanced than what we were at that young age. Are they young? Yes. Do young people make crazy decisions? Yes. They're still teenagers. But don't tell me that they can't accomplish things just because you couldn't do it at your age. They're different, and we need to start respecting them. And I wanted to do this interview with Shanti because I think she is a remarkable person. I'm not even going to say young person because she dropped a jewel of knowledge on me. You can get advice and learn something from the younger generation. She's 16, I'm 43. I learned something. And it's not something I didn't already know, but the way she said it and the way she presented it was clear. And it was accurate and it was important. And I feel like everybody can learn something from this young lady and from the younger generation. They'll show us the way. She just showed all adults you can self-publish. You don't have to shop your book around. You can do it yourself. Is it a little bit more challenging? Yes. But you can actually do it yourself if you put the work in. Nothing and nobody can stop you from doing the things that you want to accomplish if your mind is set to it and you put in the work. So Shanti, thank you for coming on. Thank you for blessing us with that knowledge. Y'all go out there, check out her website, buy her books. Because that screenplay that she wrote, that she turned into a book, I'm going to buy it because that's a dope story. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And until next time, as always, I'll holla. Whew, that was a hell of a show. Thank you for rocking with us here on Unsolicited Perspectives with Bruce Anthony. Now, before you go, don't forget to follow, subscribe, like, comment, and share our podcast wherever you're listening or watching it to it. Pass it along to your friends. If you enjoy it, that means the people that you rock with will enjoy it also. So share the wealth, share the knowledge, share the noise. And for all those people that say, well, I don't have a YouTube. If you have a Gmail account, you have a YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can actually watch our video podcast. But the real party is on our Patreon page, After Hours Uncensored and Talking Straight-ish. After Hours Uncensored is another show with my sister. And once again, the key word there is uncensored. Those are exclusively on our Patreon page. Jump onto our website at unsolicitedperspectives.com for all things us. That's where you can get all of our audio, video, our blogs, and even buy our merch. And if you're really feeling genuine and want to help us out, you can donate on our donations page. Donations go strictly to improving our software and hardware so we can keep giving you guys good content that you can clearly listen to and that you can clearly see. So any donation would be appreciative. Most importantly, I want to say thank you for listening and watching and supporting us. And I'll catch you next time. Audi 5000. Peace.